Hello, and welcome to A Day in the Life. Our guest today is somebody very special, and I'm going to introduce him to you momentarily, but we want to tell you that this is program number 102 in our series. We always like to thank our sponsors, and we especially want to thank our season sponsor for this program. Our season sponsor is Bales Dishaw Wealth Management of RBC Dominion Securities. We're very grateful to Kathy and to Michelle for their continuing support of this series. And I want to thank our program sponsors for this particular program. Our sponsors are two great fans of our guest, Heather Janak and Nicole Woods have sponsored this program. Our next program will be Gord Lacko, and he is a marine consultant who consults to the television and movie industry when they're making maritime-based movies. Well, one of the benefits of doing this program is that I get to meet some wonderful, great Canadians. And the gentleman I'm about to introduce to you is one of my personal favorites. It's a great thrill to introduce the 20-year host of Sunday Edition on CBC Radio. Welcome to Michael Enright. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Fred. Thank you very much indeed. Good to see you.
Thank you for being with us. I've looked forward to this because you've been coming into our home every week for 20 years plus, so this will be fun.
I hope I didn't disrupt things coming in every Sunday morning.
No. Michael, I want to begin, as I explained to you briefly, we try to focus on the inspiration that you had to get into the wonderful career you've had in journalism and in radio, and also to inspire our guests by using you as an example of somebody who succeeded. So we're going to go back and tell us about where you were born, please.
I was born in Toronto, in St. Michael's Hospital, in downtown Toronto, and only child. And my parents and I lived in an apartment right in the middle of town.
Can you tell us about your dad?
My father was, he was trained as a bookkeeper. He worked for Ontario Hydro, publicly owned, and he was very much in favor of that. My mother was a stenographic typist. She worked for the Department of Motor Vehicles at Queen's Park.
One of the things that's always of interest to our viewers is connections to our area. And I understand that you had a summertime connection to the Midland area.
My father we used to rent a cottage in Wabasheen,
okay,
which I just adored. It was wonderful. Pardon me. It was about a block from the water. And we'd go there every summer, and it was quite fantastic. And while there, right next door or right behind the cottage was the local Catholic church. And we being Irish Catholics, of course, we were very attentive to that. And occasionally I would serve Mass there as an altar boy. And from time to time, if I was very lucky, I'd get a ride over to the Martyr Shrine and serve Mass there. I don't think I was a very good server, but at least I showed up on time, and that was fun. And then years later, my mother and I used to take the passenger boats, from Port McNichol, the Assiniboia and the Keewatin.
Yes.
And we would take them up the Great Lakes to Fort William, as it then was, and then around to Duluth and Chicago. We loved that.
Oh, wonderful. I didn't know you had that additional connection.
Oh, just delightful. And in fact, a few years ago, I was riding my motorcycle up in the area, and there was a sign that said there was the Keewatin Boat Restaurant at Port McNichol. I think it was Port McNichol. So I went over and I looked at it, and hidden fact, Fred, the staircase in the Keewatin was designed after the staircase in the Titanic.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can use that, by the way. You can have that.
That's a valuable piece of information. Thank you. Now, Michael, I'm interested. You were a lead altar boy.
Senior altar boy. Yes, master of ceremonies. Actually, that's what they called us.
Which, having heard some of your editorial comments, may not have stuck.
You mean about the Roman Catholic Church?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Well, it was only later in life that I came to have a series of contretemps with the church. I never intended and would never intend to insult the personal faith of ordinary Catholics. But what always bothered me was the political aspect of the church as manifest in the Curia. The Curia is the political office of the Vatican.
Right.
And those people, and they stood in the way of all kinds of reforms in the church. The ordination of women, the whole question of papal infallibility, all those things. Very conservative, but populated by some of the best 17th century minds in existence. But I really hated their idea of authority and how we were all, it's not without meaning that parishioners are referred to as the flock because the Curia always looked on us as sheep.
Mm-hmm. And you've never been a great lover of authority.
I don't know what makes you say that. I used to get in all kinds of trouble in school and later in high school because I was always asking why or how do you know that? And teachers in those bygone years would make assertions and as if they were spoken truth. But I always want to know, where did you get that? How come? Why? And I think that genetically built in my desire to be a reporter.
Mm-hmm. Michael, did you have any teachers or principals in your schooling that had an impact on you, who you turned out to be, and the interests that you developed?
I can think of three, actually. In my parish school, Holy Rosary schools, the principal was named Sister Anne Francis. She was wonderful, tough, but fair. One time I was fooling around in the classroom. I was playing with a basketball. I threw the ball up at the front and knocked the head off the statue of St. Joseph. She took me behind the cloakroom and gave me the strap. And I could tell she was almost in tears having to do it. She made my parents pay for the head of the statue. When I left that, went to high school, I went to St. Michael's High School, the hockey school. I was kind of a weirdo. Well, not kind of. Certainly a weirdo because I went to the most famous hockey school in the world and couldn't skate. But I had Dave Keon in my French class. He sat in front of me. And here's where the authority came in again. The French teacher, Dave's first language was French.
Yes.
And the French teacher, we were doing reading Jules Verne, Around the World in 80 Days. And the French teacher used to give Dave a really hard time for his pronunciation. But he was fluent. He was from Rwanda, and he was fluently bilingual. The other person was Father David Bauer.
Yes.
Father Bauer's brother, Bobby Bauer, was a member of the Kraut line, which was a famous hockey line in Boston.
Right.
Milt Schmidt and Woody Dumart, and they all came from Kitchener. But Father Bauer was my homeroom teacher for 3 years. He was a gentle, sometimes not gentle, very decent, warm, encouraging teacher.
And a legendary figure.
Oh, yeah. He invented really international hockey play between Canada and other countries, right, especially in the junior team. I used to go out, and Frank Mahovitz was 4 years ahead of me. But I used to go out and watch them play the majors. And it was interesting when we went into the cafeteria for lunch. The hockey players, the majors would come in all in a group, and they go right to the front of the line. Everybody would step aside, which was great. There are other teachers there, though, who were monsters. So, but on balance, no, and I can't forget a guy named Joe Penny. Father Joe Penny taught me English and got me interested in poetry and writing. He was wonderful.
And you went off to a seminary for a brief time.
Yes, I did, Fred. Looking back, I wonder if that was one of the most feckless things I've ever done. I joined an order called the Passionists. And they were headquartered in Dunkirk, New York, the Venice of Mohawk County, right on the shores of Lake Erie.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Because I wanted to be a monk. Excuse me. I wanted to live with other monks, and I wanted to teach, preferably somewhere across the seas. And I read up about the Passionists, and they were very interesting, very holy, of course, but also very engaged in the Catholic idea of social action, which was begun back in the 1800s. Leo the 13th and others. So I went there, yeah, and it was a very interesting experience.
And how long were you there?
I was there a little more than a year.
And then
it was the coldest place. During the winter, the shoreline of Lake Erie would freeze. And in the dormitory, we all slept under bearskin blankets that had been used by the U.S. Army in Korea. So we were buried under these smelly blankets to get up at 5:30, I think, in the morning for morning prayers and breakfast and so on. It was a hard life, but it was interesting.
Did you go from there to your first employment then, when you left the seminary?
Well, I came back. I remember taking the train from Dunkirk to Buffalo and then to Toronto. The first thing I did when I got out of the monastery was buy a package of cigarettes, Pall Mall cigarettes, and smoke them like crazy. I got back to Toronto. I don't know, in an Irish Catholic family, somebody who is in the or studying for the priesthood and then comes out, it's a bit like coming out of the pen. You're a bit of you have a thing on your forehead saying failure, you know. So I went back to St. Mike's for for my final year. I had intended to stay there through grade 13 and so on. But I had this dispute with the teachers. They wanted me to learn stuff, and I didn't. So I never finished high school.
Which is
although I spent many happy years in grade 12.
Tell us about your first job. No one will believe this.
I got a job as a auto renewal clerk for the Norwich Union Fire Insurance Society. What it was I had a desk and an adding machine. Remember adding machines?
I do.
And annually, the insurance policies had to be renewed. And I would get the figure of how much we're going to increase the policy this year, 3% or 8%. And then I would get on the adding machine and fiddle with that and try and come up with the new premium and then send that off to, I don't know where it went. It just left my desk. And I had no idea from day one what I was doing. I carried my lunch in a little paper bag, and it was just, I couldn't figure, I didn't know where the stuff came from or where it went. I knew I had to get out.
And from there, you began to pursue the course that led you through the rest of your career.
Well, I took a night course at U of T on journalism. Journalism 101, I guess you'd call it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was taught by a Maclean's editor. And it was part of the ongoing education series, whatever. I turned out to be very good at it in terms of how to write a lead, and all those things, the inverted paragraph, pyramid, and all that. And so I started to look around for jobs. And there was an ad for the Barrie Examiner for a junior reporter. And I thought, that's interesting. And the next, I wrote out an application. And the next day, there was an ad for the Brampton Times and Conservator. Guess what political party it supported? Anyway, being a city kid, Barrie and Brampton, they're all the same. I mean, they could have been in northern Quebec for all I knew. So I went up to the Greyhound bus terminal on Bay Street, and it was a cheaper ticket to get to Brampton than it was to Barrie. So I went to Brampton, and I met the editor, and then I met the publisher and so on, and they hired me. That was in 1961. So I was a kid reporter. I did everything. Took pictures, developed them, reported at city council, courts, police, everything.
So the inspiration from this, Michael, is that for young people watching, when they go to seek a job, buy the cheapest bus ticket.
Get out of town. That is my advice, because what's happened to journalism and the jobs is so awful that the best thing is to try and get to a small town. Community newspapers, I think, are the blood of journalism in this country.
But there are so few of them left.
It's terrible. It's just appalling, yeah. I'd often thought if I quit the CBC, why would anybody quit the CBC? Anyway, I often thought I'd love to go and work on a small town paper.
Now, you worked on others. You went from Brampton to...
I went from Brampton. Well, I got into a spot of bother in Brampton. We had these country correspondents who sent in obits of people who died, but they must have used bowling pencils or something, because it was very hard to read. And I would rewrite the obit, and it was Mrs. Claire O'Malley who died suddenly. And Mrs. O'Malley phoned the paper and said it was my husband who died. And the publisher called me into his office. He said, "This is not good." So I knew he was going to get rid of me. So I went down the highway to Kitchener and got an interview with the Kitchener-Waterloo Record. I went on there on the Record for 2 or 3 years. Wonderful paper, family owned. John Moats was the family. Again, I covered politics and cops, and then they made me religion editor, which was a heck of a lot of fun. It was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
There were some odd things that happened, but it was a great beat.
Michael, obits have gotten other people in trouble with their jobs. In our local radio station, when it was years ago, when it was very much a local radio station, an announcer came on and in sonorous tones announced, "We regret to advise that there are no obituaries to report today."
There was a program in Kitchener that was sponsored by the local funeral home. And all it was death notices.
Yeah, isn't that great?
That was amazing.
Yeah. Now, after that, you left the country.
Got out of the country, went to London. Decided I wanted to write a novel. In fact, this was in 1962, I guess. Crossing the ocean on a Cunard liner was terrific. Didn't get seasick at all. Got to London. I knew a couple of people in London. Went to work for Reuters, the news agency. We hired a lot of Canadians on what was called Nordesk. I wound up on the West Indies and Caribbean desk, covering mostly yacht fires, which get a little tedious after a while. I was terrible at that, and I was fired after 2 weeks by the managing editor. His name was Farmer. So I got a job working for a Welsh television company called TWW, Television Wales in the West, Teledu Cymru. And I wrote continuity You know what I'm saying? Tonight at 9, Batman takes on the Joker, that kind of thing. And I was in an office with 4 women in Knightsbridge. And again, it was one of those things that everything was above. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was doing it. And it was fun. I was living in Putney Bridge. I had a little bed sit there, and I enjoyed it. But I wanted to get into journalism, and it was clear I wasn't going to do it in England. And what was clear was that I didn't have the talent to write a novel. So I came home.
And you began with the Globe? Was that your first?
Then I started with the Globe, tried to get into the Globe, the Star, the Telly, anybody.
Yeah.
And the Globe took me on. Clark Davey, the late Clark Davey, wonderful ME, managing editor, said, we never hire anybody without a degree. And I said, well, not only do I not have a degree, but I never finished grade 8. I never finished grade 12. And he looked at me, he said, I'll give you 2 weeks probation, and then you're gone. And frankly, I don't think you're going to make it. So I wrote some stuff for 2 weeks, and then he came in. Actually, we were in the bathroom, in the washroom, and at adjoining urinals, and he said, okay, kid, 3 months. You got 3 months probation. And then that's where it started. I stayed 6 years, 6 or 7 years. I loved it. More fun. It was just, I covered Queen's Park. John Robarts was the premier. And there wasn't a day that we just didn't fall down laughing. It was just amazing. I loved it. I just loved it. I love the Globe because they let you write. They let you do what they hired you to do.
And your print journalism took you to Time magazine for a while?
I left the Globe, went to Time in Montreal.
And then you were at Maclean's, where you became...
Well,
or was
I was hired away from Time to do a local radio, CBC radio program called Daybreak, which was a morning show.
Right.
And from 6 to 9 in the morning. Now, English language radio in those days in Montreal, talk about minority listening. I don't think our immediate families listened to the programming. I really wasn't although I was the last person, I think, on the network to actually read a commercial. We had commercials in those days. Remember, it was Direct Film and Dorian Suits were our 2 sponsors. And every Friday, this young man came in, to talk about famous speeches. And his name was Conrad Black.
Really?
Yeah. He's as you know, the British journalist. Yeah.
He's been a guest on this program. Yes.
Has he indeed?
Yes.
Well, he came in every, and I remember one time he came in, he was going to talk about the Gettysburg Address or something. And I said, this is true. It's Friday morning, terrific. We'll be back right after this message from Direct Film with Conrad Hall. And he looked at me and said, what did you say? I said, God, I'm sorry. I'm very tired. Conrad Hall is a B actor from old time movies. So we came off the commercial. And I said, well, you can tell it's Friday. I don't know what I'm doing here. I really apologize to our guest, Mr. Conrad Hall. I said it the second time. Anyway, I didn't like getting up at 4 a.m. in February and walking down Côte des Neiges, the wind so I quit and started to freelance magazine writing. I think I sold 2 pieces in a year. And then Keith Spicer, with whom I'd worked at the Globe Mail, was the Commissioner of Official Languages. And he called me and said he wanted me to be his press secretary. My French was terrible, faible. But I went to Ottawa and worked for him. And then in a strange sort of way, the Star heard about me and hired me.
Great. Now you came back to CBC as I understand it in 1985.
No, I came back to replace Peter Zosky.
Okay.
In 1974.
Yes. Okay.
That was what I call my suicide mission.
That was a long-term job, replacing Peter Zosky.
Just unbelievable. I was hired I was hired in July, and then we went to air in September, and I was fired in February. So there you go. I wasn't warm enough. And Pete was warm, as we all know.
Yes.
Yeah. Or as he said, if you can fake that, you can fake anything.
So you came back then a decade or so later, and that's when you were the managing editor of CBC Radio News?
Yeah, I went into management for my sins.
Right. That'll get you.
Say again?
That'll get you.
Oh, in those days, though, we really had a news department.
Yes.
I think my budget was $29 million a year. We had hundreds of employees. We had foreign bureaus around the world, and we had, I think it was the gold standard in terms of Ottawa political reporting. People like Ken McCreath and Brian Kelleher, and these wonderful, wonderful reporters. But I did that for 3 years. And then I went home one night and, I know what happened. I got a note, an email, saying that you'll be eligible for your pension, eligible for retirement, July the 4th, 2005 or something. And I went home and I told my late wife, Janet, that I've got to get out of here or I'm going to lose my immortal soul. Do you mind if I quit? And she said, you do what you want. If you have to quit, which I did. And got out of it.
But they got you back again on air.
Well, they let me audition for As It Happens.
Yes.
But it had to be kept a secret because they didn't want anyone to know that a manager would actually walk away from a job for life to go on the air. It's just a little more precarious. So the head of current affairs literally rented a hotel room in downtown Toronto and interviewed me. And he said, why would we hire you? What do you bring to the program that others wouldn't? And I said, vulnerability, because I think the all-knowing host idea is bizarre. It's preposterous. We don't know everything. I don't care about everything. And neither does the listener.
That's another way in which you differ from Zosky, who did.
Well, he and I got into a dreadful argument one time. He had heard the show As It Happens the night before, and somebody had come on, a scientist, something, I don't know, and I said, I'm sorry, I didn't understand a word you said. Could you repeat that using small words?
Yeah. And
the next morning, Zosky just tore us. You never say you don't know. It's your job to know. You can't let the listener down. Well, I didn't agree with him then. Certainly don't agree with him now.
Well, you had a long run, Michael, on As It Happens.
10 years.
10 years with Alan Maitland and then with Barbara Budd, a couple of great CBC names. Was it fun to work with Maitland?
He was. You have to understand, Fred, that in those years, CBC Radio was populated by eccentric staff announcers, gone off to war, survived, and come back. And they were some of the weirdest people I've ever met. Wonderful, professional, top-notch people. And Maitland was one of them. Alan always said that he was responsible for starting the Halifax naval riots in 1945. He was walking down a street, he saw a liquor store, he smashed the window and grabbed a bottle of rum, and then all hell broke loose and the cops came, and that was the Halifax riot. I don't believe him for a moment, but he said that.
It's a great story.
He had the best pipes of any announcer I've ever heard anywhere, at BBC, whatever. And his storytelling of The Shepherd or Front Porch Al or just terrific. And we used to kid in the studio. One time we went live every night, but he hit the button, he said, good evening, I'm Michael Enright. And I said, you are? Really? And we broke up and felt. So we went to music, came back, and then we both started talking at the same time. So it was just, we couldn't get through the thing.
That's fun.
And the producer said, that was a disaster. We have to edit it out going west. And Mate said, that was the funniest thing that's ever happened to me in broadcasting.
Yeah.
And we're going to lose it, you know?
Yeah.
The other time was the year where the producer said, I do not want to hear the word Christmas on the radio. Happy holidays, happy festival time. But if I hear the word Christmas, things will happen. But on that night, hit the mic at 5:30, 5:31, and Maitland said, good evening, I'm Alan Maitland, and a very Merry Christmas to all our listeners. Which was great.
Oh, that's fun.
I had a lot of fun.
From there, you went to This Morning, a program
Yes,
that had
new program.
Morningside. Yeah.
We replaced Morningside.
Yeah. And you did that with Avril Benoit for a couple of years. And then, as I understand it, that split into weekday and Sunday programming.
I have to explain. The first broadcast, the first weekend that the program was going to be broadcast was the death of Lady Diana.
Oh.
That, we had a whole program planned. We had to throw it away. We had a big meeting on the Sunday, and we said, what the hell do we do? And I said, well, look, why don't you send one of us, Avril or me, to London, and we'll do the show from London and Toronto, which happened. I went to London, she stayed, and we did this whole, and the papers went crazy. They said, it certainly isn't Morningside. This is journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And did that for 3 years. And then you're right, it split off. The Sunday edition, the title of it was the Sunday edition of This Morning.
I see. Okay. Well, that's how many of our younger viewers will know you, is from the program Sunday edition. So let's talk about it.
Sure.
You said that it was the greatest experience and challenge in your career as a journalist.
Yes, I stand by that.
What was different about it than what you'd done before?
What I said was, in the beginning, was that I don't want to duplicate other programs. Now, everybody says that.
Yeah.
It's very hard not to. But I pushed it a bit. I pushed the envelope a bit. I said, look, if somebody else does it, we don't. Unless we can take something and make it our own. And the modern word, which I hate, is brand.
Yes.
But if we can make it our own, okay. If we can't, we won't do it.
Right.
Secondly, every program proposal has to be based on an idea. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be in a story meeting and hear somebody say, well, let's do something on the budget. No, that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. The third element was that there were 3 pillars for the program: long-form interviews, music, and documentaries. And all 3 are important. And that's what we set out to do.
One of the things that you, and I was a huge fan of both the program and you personally. I often listen to it later or earlier because it's available before the morning online. One of the things you achieved that fascinates me is the way you related to your audience. Everybody who listened to that show thought they knew you. And you have a big audience in the community that will be watching this. And everybody kind of thought Michael Enright was, their friend or in their circle. I guess today we'd say in their bubble.
Well, I don't think there's a greater compliment that can be paid to some broadcaster. That's the whole reason that I put radio above every other media form. It's the intimacy. Mm-hmm. It's instantaneous. It's immediate. And when my wife died, my first wife died in 1990, and there was an outpouring from the audience. There were hundreds and hundreds of letters. This was pretty much before email, that were extraordinary in terms of my loss became their loss in a sense, I don't want to be metaphysical about it, but that was it. And I would meet people and I still hear from people whose perhaps their parent had a terminal illness or was in a nursing home, that kind of thing. And the program and some of the things I said had an impact on the people they loved. And you don't get that kind of intimacy with you don't get it in print. Certainly don't get it in television. Yeah. You don't get it in movies or whatever. But this is right there. And that's why it's so important now, more important now than it was when I started, that the public broadcaster be protected and be allowed to flourish, because we've never been in need of it more.
Michael, you said that the Sunday audience listens differently.
It does.
Explain it.
Because I know I listen differently. Monday to Friday, you want the weather, you want the traffic, you want to know what's happened in town, in Toronto. Sadly, what was the latest shooting over the weekend? And it has to be quick and smart and set up the day for you. Mm-hmm. And during the course of that day, you are flooded with information, not understanding, not context, not wisdom, but information. Yeah. By the time the weekend rolls around, it's my view the audience has had enough news. Mm-hmm. And by the time that Sunday came around, Sunday was a day of rest, and people wanted something different. They wanted relief. They wanted some kind of attachment to a program that says, yeah, it's a pretty crappy world, but here's this is very interesting, or here's that, and so on. And I think that also found a home with the listener. They're tired, and I got a letter one year from a United Church minister in Weyburn, Saskatchewan, home of Tommy Douglas, as you know. And he said, I'm thinking of moving my 9 o'clock service out to the parking lot because people are sitting in their cars listening to your radio program. And I said, don't do that, Pastor. I said, but it became, and the thing that was really gratifying, it wasn't my program so much, it was theirs. They own it. They pay for it.
Yes.
They pay my salary. They pay for the microphones. They pay for the studio time. Yeah. This is the proprietorship of the Sunday edition, and indeed of CBC Radio, by Canadians is really gratifying, very exciting.
Your program's been described as being fiercely intelligent, and it is. I suspect that some of the people who are watching this will be astounded that you don't have grade 12, because the breadth of your interests and the depth of your understanding on so many different topics, from music, opera, to your knowledge of what's going on in the world, the things you've read. How does a guy who dropped out of grade 12, and this is for those who want to be inspired, Michael, how does a grade...
I don't recommend it.
It wasn't a step.
On your first point, intelligent, whatever that quote was.
Yeah.
I read a biography of Harold Lasky, the left-wing socialist head of the London School of Economics. And he said it was his job to encourage people to the subversiveness of thought. And I love that. Mm-hmm. That to me was, because thinking is, read Orwell, thinking is subversive. Mm-hmm. I don't know how to say this modestly, so I'll say it immodestly. I have a freakish memory. I was tested when I was a kid. I do not have a photographic memory, mm-hmm. but I do have what's called retention total recall. If you tell me your birthday, I'll never forget it for some reason, because I will connect it to other things. Mm-hmm. Really? You were born December 7th, 1941? That's Pearl Harbor. Thank you very much. Yeah. I can remember my father's first license plate for the first car we have, 259E7.
Yeah.
It's no talent. It's like having a trick knee, or those people that can bend their thumbs back. That's what it's a fluke.
You were born with it.
Yeah, I was born with it, but without it, I'd be a squeegee kid. I mean, and it saved me so many times when I'm interviewing someone. I interviewed Alan Arkin one time. He said, "How did you know that?" Well, I happen to remember something. And, I interviewed George C. Scott after his PR guy had whispered, he's hammered. If he doesn't like the question, he'll punch you right in the face. But I quoted a line that George C. Scott used in The Hustler, and he was sort of amazed by that.
You have one of the things that shines through, and this is in part because of my professional background, Michael, you have a real passion for justice. How did you develop that? Is that through your personal experience or through the experience of others around you?
Well, without giving offense, or even with giving offense, I grew up in an Irish Catholic household where the weight of 900 years of oppression by the English was really felt around the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like what the English had done. And I was always alert to people of authority using it harshly against people without it.
Yes.
And it made me mad, quite frankly. It made me angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see it everywhere. And I grew up, I was a teenager in the time of the lunch counter sit-ins, the Freedom Summer, the Freedom Riders, the whole civil rights movement. The murder of the three civil rights workers, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, it changed my life. They were in Mississippi trying to get the vote out. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I just get angry. I guess that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And I used to have arguments with producers. We always put the victim on the radio, the person who was cut off welfare and, single mother and so on. I don't want to talk to her. I want to talk to the bad guys. I want to talk to the person who did it.
Yeah.
And leave that poor woman alone. Give me the bad guy who did it. And bad guys are far more interesting to interview.
Let's talk about some of the people you've interviewed, because you've had fascinating experiences. Who would you say you felt the most honored to have the opportunity to interview?
Honored?
Honored.
Wow. I interviewed Queen Noor of Jordan once. That was an honor. I didn't think of it as an honor. I always thought it was luck. It was a lucky break for the kid mm-hmm. who grew up on Earl Street. Yeah. So when I used to talk to Christopher Hitchens, for example,
yes,
I was just in awe of his mind and his powers of attention and oratory and so on. I interviewed him a number of times. He was probably the smartest person I've ever interviewed. There have been some disasters, but I think mostly ordinary people. Mm-hmm. It's an honor to talk to the ordinary Canadians. Yeah. It's an honor to talk to them,
What was the funniest moment you had doing Sunday Edition?
Oh, God, there were so many, all of them embarrassing. I once told live that we were doing a thing on Tibet and the Chinese and the Dalai Lama, all of that. Mm-hmm. And two Tibetan monks were traveling Canada to raise funds. And they were ushered into the studio. The producer leaned down and said, "I think the one on the right speaks English," which is not the best start.
It's not good research either, is it?
No, it's not. Anyway, the thing was a disaster. They couldn't speak English, and I had given up my Tibetan studies years ago. So the whole thing was a complete fiasco. And at one point, I looked through the control room to the studio. Pardon me. I looked through the studio to the control room, and I couldn't see anybody. Nobody's head was above the counter because they were all on the floor laughing at me. That was perhaps the funniest. One of the interviews I did was with King Hussein of Jordan, Queen Noor's wife.
Yes. Yeah.
And we were lucky to get him. And I was a show-off, you know. Well, Your Majesty, when you look at the two-state solution, what exactly do you mean? How do you think? And I went on blabbing and didn't know what I was talking about. And he said, well, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid I've forgotten the question. Can you repeat it? And I said, Your Majesty, I hate to tell you, but I forgot it as well. Yeah. So that was embarrassing. Foreign interviews are tricky. So, you know, because there are accents involved.
I was going to ask about one of those. There was a Bosnian Serb former politician with whom you had a bit of a blunt question. Can you set that one up for us?
Well, Radovan Karadzic was the head of the Bosnian Serbs, and his mission in life was to extirpate Bosnian Muslims. He was a poet and a psychiatrist, and he always considered himself the smartest person, not just in the room, but in the country. We got him on the air, and I was reading a script, and it was good, but it was all political and real politics. Why do you, you know, and I thought, the hell with this. If I were interviewing Hitler, I wouldn't read a thing. So I threw the script away. I said, tell me, Ms. Karadzic, how's the ethnic cleansing coming along? Well, he exploded. There is no ethnic cleansing. The producer through the glass said, well, we'll never get him again. Got him every time we phoned because he thought he could. Oh, Mr. Mike. Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah. And the Atlantic magazine, for some reason, wrote a feature about that question and about as it happens.
Yeah.
But he later went to jail for life, I think, at The Hague.
Right. You also had fun on April Fool's Day with someone that sounded like Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter had written an op-ed page in the New York Times criticizing Canada for stumpage fees. And until that moment, I didn't know what stumpage fees were. It was a subsidy to our forest industry, which he said was dumping and undercutting the American thing. And I thought, all right, okay. So I hired a voice actor, a brilliant actor, and I wrote a script. And we started out very ordinary. Mr. President, why? We reached him in Plains, Georgia. Mr. President, tell me exactly what your argument is. I don't quite. Well, I think that Canada has, I think, went on and on and on. And finally, I said, well, Mr. President, tell me, why should we pay any attention to a washed-up peanut farmer like yourself from a hick town in Georgia? Well, I don't believe you'd say, and he went on and on. It was fabulous. Yeah. And I would, during the course of the evening, I would say, would just speed it up, Mr. President, we don't have much time. Hurry up. Come on, say what you're going to say. And it went, and it was just, anyway, it ended. And people were outraged. They were outraged at me. They wanted to hang me. Yeah. The thing I loved best about it was that the president of the CBC, Bob Rabinovich, oh, no, I've got to back up. The foreign editor of the Globe and Mail was having a shower, and he had a shower phone. And he heard this interview, and he ran to the typewriter or computer and wrote a story which ran on the front page of the Globe and Mail. Enright insults Carter, wood chips fly. The president of the CBC, Bob Rabinovich, was in London, England. And as you know, when the Air Canada goes, they have the newspapers there. So he got the Globe and Mail and saw this thing about Enright. He must have had a terrible flight across the ocean. People were just beside themselves. And finally, the Globe wrote an editorial about how it had been taken in. I found out later, though, that President Carter himself thought it was quite funny.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? He would. He would.
Yeah.
That's great.
But boy, I got threats. Wow. And even after people knew it was a hoax, one guy said, he stopped me on the way to the subway. He said, well, Jimmy Carter builds houses for the poor. And I said, I certainly know that, but the actor I hired doesn't build houses for the poor. It was very difficult.
That's good. One of the guests that you had, who was one of my favorites, was Dick Cavett. And I must tell you that hearing you and Cavett go back and forth was just an absolute radio joy for me. Total
Gentleman. Just a wonderful, wonderful guy. And I had been a Cavett fan, like you. And it was interesting. He came into the studio in New York. It's on 3rd Avenue, near 46th Street. And the woman who runs the studio is German, speaks German. So he's from Nebraska. So he started speaking German to and I overheard this. And I said, before we went on air, I said, excuse me, Mr. Cavett, we're not doing the interview in German. You know that. And he said, oh, I thought we were. I said, no, we're doing it in Lithuanian. And the guy laughed. And then we did the thing. But he was terrific. Just a real smart gentleman.
Yeah.
That was great. He sent me his book. He autographed it.
I must tell you that your final show on June 26th was just such a delight to someone who's followed the program, to hear from so many of those people who become sort of part of our world.
Yeah.
And who you're very fortunate to spend time with, Paul Rogers and Adam Gopnik. And
Fred, the whole thing in my case is luck. I'm the luckiest. I've been blessed. Excuse me, I really have been blessed.
Well, I don't know anyone else who can call Margaret Atwood Peg.
I've known her for years and years and years. We were friends, still are. I was a friend of her late husband, Graham Gibson.
Yeah.
Peggy's a very tough interview. You've got to bring your best game with her.
She's very smart.
Very smart. And one of the things she does, she'll ask you, I'll say, Ms. Atwood, what do you think of the 4 most important things in writing science fiction novels? I don't know, Michael. What do you think?
Yeah.
That's the thing that the interviewer hates to hear.
Absolutely.
Just, oh, God, don't ask me that, please, When we did a whole series on As It Happens on the introduction of the GST, I created this thing where I buy a pair of goalie pads for $99.95. And we called the guy at the CRA in Ottawa and tried to get him to explain it to me, which I could never do. And I could never understand it. And at one point he said, I'm sorry, I'm not making myself. Do you play hockey, Mr. Enright? And I said, no, I'm not buying any goalie pads. That's all right. Don't worry about it.
That's funny. Michael, you have many, many interests. I've read that you have interests in prison reform and medical pain relief and organ transplants and classical music. We know that from the program. One of your interests, I understand, is very close to you, and that's you're advocating for the intellectually disabled. Tell us about your work there.
Absolutely. I have a daughter now, Nancy Kathleen. Wonderful. She's in her mid-30s. She was born with what's called a chromosomal deficit. The number 10 chromosome was missing some DNA. So she is developmentally disabled. She's an amazing person. So because of her, I've gotten involved with community living in various centers around the province. Pardon me. And these people are neglected. The parents of these people are tired. They don't march, they don't protest, they don't make signs and go down to Queen's Park. They're physically exhausted taking care of these people. You can have people who are 65 years old in diapers living at home. There again, it's authority could change it overnight. Prison reform. We serve the crappiest food in the world in Canadian prisons. You could change it overnight. Why can't First Nations bands get clean water? There are 610 bands in the country. There are about 70 of them now under water warning. That could be fixed overnight. You write a check, fix the damn thing, you know? That's what bothers me is in these instances of, we know what the problem is. We know, or at least have an idea what the solution is. And we don't do anything about it, especially with prison reform. That's why we took the show into a prison. We took the show to Millhaven for a musical concert. It was wonderful.
Michael, we're almost out of time, but I do want to acknowledge that you now have some doctorates. Congratulations on that. Honorary.
Thank you very much, Fred.
That's wonderful. You're a member of the Order of Canada, and in part that was a recognition for your advocating on behalf of people with disabilities. So congratulations for that. You've won a whole bunch of other awards that I won't bore you with, but you also ride horseback and ride a motorcycle. I wonder how many of your fans and followers know that.
About the motorcycle, I think quite a few. I get a lot of mail. A few years ago, back in the 90s, I would go out to a ranch in Montana called the Shively Ranch and work with cattle. So you'd be in the saddle for 10 hours a day. I loved it. The motorcycle, because it's dangerous, is very appealing. You're that far from your mortality.
Every time. Michael, we are now out of time, and I would love to talk to you for another 2 or 3 hours.
It went so fast, Fred.
It's fun. I do want to just take a second, though, and thank our viewers for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Michael Enright. I want to thank our technical support team with Rogers TV, the folks at the Midland Cultural Centre who make this program possible, especially our series supporter, Bales Deschamps Wealth Management, and our program supporters, Heather Janak and Nicole Woods. Michael, what a delight this has been. It's just a dream come true for me to speak to you.
Well, it's an honor for me, I got to tell you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. And to our viewers, join us next time when our guest will be Gord Lacko, who is a consultant to TV and movies about maritime movie making. So, Michael, all the best and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Fred. Take care.
We'll listen to you soon on your new program.
I hope so.
Thank you.